I'm just kidding, I'm not actually in the cold. I'm on a green screen, as you can see. Doing green screen effects on your videos is actually super simple if you do it the right way. So here I am today to teach you how to do a green screen effect. So first, right off the bat, there are many different softwares that you work in video, whether that's Premiere, After Effects, DaVinci Resolve, Final Cut, Avid, iMovie. Most, if not all, video editing software should have a green screen effect that will be able to cut out the green with varying levels of settings to change between them. Now, since I'm inside, I'm gonna go ahead and take my coat off because it's getting a little bit warm. So what do you need for a green screen effect? First off, obviously you need the green screen. So I'm in a studio right now that has a green screen on a wall, so I don't have to worry about transporting it and getting it all set up. But not many people have that, so there are options for those who don't. Depending on what you're filming, a smaller green screen might work for you. ELGATO makes a small pop-up banner that is fully green that works for smaller shoots, mostly where they're not moving around too much because it's only maybe this wide to this wide. But I'll throw a link down in the description if you want to go and check that out. If you're doing a little bit more moving around from side to side, then something like that might not work as well for you, but there are options as well. First off, you could probably go out and find a green seamless paper. Seamless is basically those giant rolls of paper that you see in photographers' studios, similar to what Potato Jet uses in his backdrops in his videos. You can also get green fabric. So this is just one giant sheet of pure green fabric. You can see it matches pretty similar to the green that I have on the backdrop. Now this is handy because if you're doing something that involves the ground and the background, you can drape it from the background down onto the ground as well, so you can key out the ground and the backdrop all at once. This is actually how I did my intro for the Animal Crossing video that I did way back at the start of the inception of my channel. All I did was I clamped it up to my curtain rod and then draped it down and then onto the ground, and I stood on it, angled the camera down so my whole body was covered in green, and then I edited out the green. So something like this is super versatile. Creasing can sometimes be an issue on these, which may not be as much of an issue on the pop-up banners or the seamless or a painted wall. So that is one drawback to having a fabric like this, but for the most part, these are great because they're super portable, cheap, maybe like 30 bucks, and usually pretty good quality. I'll also link this in the description as well. So now that we have our green set up, next you want to look into lighting. So lighting is super important in green screen effects because that's how you can separate your subject, which is me in this case, away from the green background. So right now I have 3 main lights pointed at me right now. You can probably get away with doing only 2 or maybe even just 1, but I'm in a studio with a lot of lighting right now, so I figured go big or go home, use as many lights as I can get. You'll also notice that I have a little shine over my shoulder and my head, and that's coming from a light right here. This is just a little LED light acting as the hair light, which will help give that separation just a little bit more of an effect. And then finally, I have 2 lights, one here, pointed at the background specifically, so that any shadows from the main lights casting on me don't cast a shadow onto the backdrop. The lights on the backdrop are super important because those are how you make sure that the green is as smooth of green as possible. You can see that if I move the light too close to the green, it becomes super hot and bright, and obviously that's a different color than the green up here, so it'll be a lot harder to make the green screen effect if it's not just one seamless, continuous green color. So take some time, move the lights around, and double check with your viewfinder on your camera because sometimes it'll see something different from what your eye sees, and realistically, you're going to want to go ahead with what the camera sees over what you see, because in the end, what the camera sees is what you're going to be working on your computer with. Now I'm going to go ahead and fix the light. So we've got our green screen, we've got our lighting. Obviously, you're going to need some sort of camera and mic setup. Maybe not a mic if you're doing something that doesn't require audio, but clearly a camera is a must. There's no specific camera that I'll recommend for this because basically any camera will work as long as you can get the footage onto your editor. But when you're working in CGI and effects like this, the higher resolution means that you can usually get just a little bit finer of a detail when you're working around fine edges like cutting out a subject from a green screen. If you're outputting a video in 1080p, there's no harm in filming it in 4K, doing the green screen effect, and then exporting it as 1080 because you'll get a better separation if you're working in a higher resolution. Now, before you go off and film this footage, a few things to note would be make sure you don't have any other green objects in the frame if you're going to be using them. Here I have a green can of sparkling water. If I hold that in front of me and I apply the green screen effect, you can see that it's applying it to this can as well because the effect is really just targeting the specific color. If the final video needed this can to be green but the background not be green, I would end up having to mask out frame by frame this can just to make sure that the green screen effect doesn't apply to this. And this also applies to any clothing that you have. So if you had a green logo on your shirt, that green would end up being cut out and then that specific part of the shirt would become transparent. So then you might have the mountains in the background going through your shirt through the little hole that you just cut out from the green screen. Now, if using green on your subjects is a specific requirement for you, you can always switch from a green screen to a blue screen. Blue screens are often used when green is necessary for filming. Just like the green fabric that I showed earlier, you can get blue fabrics as well, and I'm sure you can also get blue pop-up banners and blue seamless as well. So there are options if you need to use a blue screen instead of a green screen. Another thing to keep in mind is where you're going to be moving in the frame. It's easy to get caught up in what you're doing when you're filming something on a green screen, and maybe by accident you reach over and you cover up something that was going to be masked out. So if I had this C-stand or this chair masked out originally and I reach in front of it, something was going to be happening with this hand. I would end up having to mask out specifically around this hand like this, frame by frame, every time that it moves over the chair, or I would have to figure out some other way. Same thing if I reach up over the frame and I cut my hands straight out of the frame, then I lose that part of my body and you can't really recover that unless you're a CGI wizard. So just keep in mind your framing and where you're going to be on camera. Having a secondary display where you can actually see yourself while you're being filmed is also a good benefit to have. Another thing to think about before you start filming is what's going to be replacing your green screen. If you're going to be putting yourself in a scene of a sunset, for example, and the sun is setting over here facing you, but all your lighting is over here, it's going to look weird on camera if your light source in real life is opposite from the light source coming from the background video. Now you can sometimes flip the image to make that a little bit better, but sometimes it isn't possible. Like if I was to have this words on my shirt and I flipped my image, it would look weird having backwards words on my shirt. So just keep that in mind. If your back plate, which is the background video that you're going to be putting in, has more light sources coming from the back facing the camera, maybe think about putting more lights behind you and less lights in front of you. That way you can actually try and match the lighting that's coming from the background video. Another thing to think about is sometimes shooting in a log profile can add a little bit of grain to your image if you're not exposing properly. So sometimes using a more normal profile can actually help make a green screen effect look better because you don't have to worry about any noise coming from the conversion from log to Rec 709. But if you're confident in your abilities to expose correctly and grade your footage properly afterwards, then by all means go for a log profile if you want. So if you're all framed up right, you're lit up, and you're mic tested, go shoot. Make sure you're keeping yourself in frame, have some fun, get your footage, and then load it up into your editing software. All right, so I've got the footage that I just shot in the other room in Premiere now. I'm gonna go ahead and make a new sequence, and it's going to be 1920 by 1080, 24 frames per second, and I'm just going to call it sequence 1. I'm going to drag my footage onto that clip, keep existing settings, right click, scale to frame size. So now we are looking good right here. I'm going to lift the footage over into V2, new item, color matte, and I'm going to pick a nice pink. So that's going to go underneath this video. I just like using pink, and I'll explain in a bit. So we can see here that colors here are a little bit muted. So I'm going to go ahead to Lumetri color and then open up my Lumetri scopes, select my video source, and I'm just going to edit the colors just a little bit to make it just a little bit better. I'm going to go down to hue, and then I'm going to click right on the center of the green area, center of the cyan area, and then the center of the yellow area. Now I'm going to drag the cyan up to the green a little bit, and then the yellow side just down to green over here. And now that should give us just a little bit more of a flatter green. We can see when it's off, it's just a little bit yellow all around. So now we can you can see right here, the green gets boosted just a bit and the other colors move down. So that's looking good now. And then if you really want to go ham with editing this colors, you can go to HSL secondary, select your green, check your mask here, maybe add another green down here, see how that is. And then just keep adding with the eyedropper where you see the green isn't being activated, or just move these around a little bit. The one thing we don't want is any sort of coverage of your subject, so I'm trying to get away from that now. So that's looking pretty good. Now I have pretty much the whole background covered up. I can undo this mask, go down, and then maybe just boost the tint to the green a little bit and boost the saturation just a little bit. Now we can check the Lumetri on and off to see the difference. We can see here that the green is definitely a lot more vibrant, and my skin tones are actually looking a little bit better now too. Contrast is overall just a little bit better, so I'm going to go ahead and say that that's good to go for now. This amount of editing might be different for you depending on how much you have to do for it, but as long as you can get a fairly consistent green all the way across your image, that's the best thing for you. Next we're going to go to our effects panel and search key. We're going to go down to Ultra key and drag that down onto our video clip. Go to effect controls. And here we have the Ultra key effect. So now we're going to go in key color, and you're going to want to select somewhere on the green that's as close to your subject as possible. So I'm going to go right in here. Since I used pink, it's a really good contrasting color to green, so it always helps to see the amount of difference between the green and the pink. Another thing you can do is using white so that you can see the amount of shadows that are left over in the image. Here we can fix that up in the matte generation dropdown. This will be different for every clip that you work on, so it's just a matter of playing around with your settings here and making sure that you're not making any adjustments that will harm your subject. Since I'm clearly having some trouble with dealing with the shadows and the edges, this is where I might want to go deselect the Ultra key, open back up into Lumetri Color, and maybe edit the greens just a little bit more so I can get a better selection. So here you can see I'm making it brighter, which might help with the shadows. You can also go back to curves and go to hue versus luma, and select the dark part, and we lift that up a little bit. Now we go back into Ultra key. I'm going to reset my key color by clicking on the eyedropper and just clicking on the gray beside it. Turn it back on, and now we go back to the key. So now we can see that I already fixed up a lot of our issues. We can go and maybe edit it just a little bit more. But that's pretty much good enough for now. You can see that the stool and the C-stand are still in frame. I put those there specifically so that I can show you this part. Now basically we're just going to go ahead to opacity and start a mask. Going to go to the mask and invert it. So now it's all gone. You can see that we have a sharp spot here. We can feather that out a little bit more, and it's almost like it was never there. We can check with the purple. It's still just a little bit there. Maybe we have to edit the mask a little bit there. So now if I go and find my stock clip of a gloomy background, try and make it nice and cold. Here we can see that the green screen worked. There's still a little bit of a halo around me, so that is where you go into Ultra key and maybe go into the matte cleanup and go to choke. So here I am in front of a dark and gloomy rainforest, but you can tell that I don't really look like I'm supposed to be there, and that's because I'm not really colored the same way. So if you wanted to do that, you can go and drag your green screen footage off from above this so you can just see the your back plate. Go to your clip, go to Lumetri Color, Color Wheels and Match, and then click on Comparison View, and then just scrub through the timeline until you can see your background and your subject beside each other, and you're just going to click Apply Match. So now I actually look like I'm almost part of the scene where I'm at. This goes back to what I was talking about with the direction of the lighting. I clearly have a lot more of a intense light shining on my face here than what the scene would normally suggest, especially because this tree is being lit from the right side, but my face is being lit from the left. So this is why you should always find your back plate before you start filming so that you can match your lighting accordingly. Now I can always go to effects and do a horizontal flip, and now the lighting matches just a little bit better, but I think it's still a little bit too intense. But that's basically a super simple way to do a green screen effect on Premiere Pro and using a background clip. Thanks for watching. That was a step-by-step example of how to turn footage from this to this. Hope you liked it. If you did, throw a big thumbs up. If you loved it, throw a subscribe, and hope to see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Peace.